Hi, and welcome to People in Innovation, a CPI podcast. From groundbreaking discoveries to the challenges behind the breakthroughs, we shine a light on the people behind the innovations that are shaping our future. I'm Steve Bagshaw, Chair of the Value Manufacturing Catapult, and your host for this new series. In this series, we're focusing on engineering biology, what many are calling the next industrial revolution. It has the power to transform how we make medicines, materials, fuels, and everyday products in ways that are more sustainable and better for society. And this, our first episode, I'm joined by two fantastic guests. I have Professor Aline Miller from the University of Manchester, who is leading pioneering research in this field, and Dr. Clare Trippett, who's a Principal Strategic Opportunities Manager at CPI, and who works closely with industry and government to facilitate the translation and scale-up of innovations. So before we dive in, would you both introduce yourselves and your journey into engineering biology? Aline, would you go first?
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I'm Aline Miller. As you said, I'm a professor at the University of Manchester. So I sit in the Manchester Institute of Biotechnology, which is a hub of activity. It covers the breadth of topics that we're going to cover today. My own research is looking at sort of biomimetics and trying to mimic what's happening in nature, and then we try to evolve it to improve on it as well. I also lead an industrial biotechnology innovation catalyst activity, which is an EPSRC funded Northwest based impact acceleration activity. And it's led by Manchester, co-created with the University of Liverpool, looping in all the universities across the Northwest. And importantly, it's co-created with our combined authorities. So Greater Manchester Combined Authority and Liverpool City Region, and Cheshire and Warrington as well. So we spread right across and loop in and work with very closely with companies from micro all the way through to corporate. I'm also Chief Scientific Officer of Unit M, the university's new innovation arm. So I'm excited to talk today about some of the challenges and opportunities for getting the exciting technology from the universities out into the real world.
Brilliant. Thanks, Aline. And I'm so glad you could join us this morning. Claire, would you introduce yourself as well, please?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. I'm Clare Trippett. I work as part of CPI's strategy team, and I look at strategic opportunities in life science and engineering biology. So I've spent my whole career working in the biotech and engineering biology field across different sectors. I've worked across the innovation life cycle from new product discovery, the translational stages, taking a product from the lab to the market, and also the commercial side of things as well. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. Well, one of the things about engineering biology is, first of all, just the name engineering biology. When you talk to people in the street about it, there's a bit of a blankness comes over. And I wondered how you both would describe engineering biology to somebody who was leaning over your fence and saying, so what do you do? Aline, how do you describe engineering biology to others?
So I think it's a really interesting concept and question. So for me, it's really about applying sort of the rigorous rules of engineering that we're all kind of familiar with and see the impact of. So it's applying those rules of engineering to design and build new biological components or parts, and then assemble those parts in predetermined ways to be able to redesign existing biological systems and using those for real world exciting application areas and really to take the impact, as you talked about, in terms of foods, fuels, medicines, materials, basically everything that we kind of encounter on a day-to-day basis.
And Claire, you said you've been in biotech all your career. What's the difference between biotechnology and engineering biology? How do you describe that to others?
Yeah, I mean, I loved Aline's description of engineering biology there. I would say engineering biology, it's kind of harnessing the potential of the natural world and all the incredible biology that's happening all around us. It's engineering it and scaling it to create new products, everything from new medicines, new types of food ingredients, and more sustainable materials, things like bio-based textiles. So we're using living organisms, cells and biological systems to create valuable products that can improve our life, improve our quality of life, protect us from illnesses, protect the environment. I would say in terms of the differences between engineering biology and biotechnology, I think to be honest, this comes up a lot, and I'd say that the lines are quite blurred between the two terms. I think some people believe that they're the same thing, and I think that can be a valid opinion. For me, I see engineering biology as it's kind of an evolution of traditional biotechnology. We're applying design and engineering principles and using tools like AI and automation to create new biological functions and systems with kind of unparalleled speed and precision and flexibility. So I think there is a distinction between the two.
Great stuff. And Aline, people talk about synthetic biology as well. Is that a confusion, or is that actually distinctively different in your head?
Yeah, so I think there's a whole sort of blurred spectrum of the definitions, and I think what we can do as a community is try to help clarify some of the differences and or similarities. Partly so government can understand and tap into it a little bit more easily, and partly then sort of public perception and adoption that I'm sure we'll touch upon today as we go through. But for me, thinking about sort of biotechnology, I kind of see it as sort of harnessing what nature produces, and the millennia nature has had to evolve to make highly functional enzymes, highly functional biological components, or materials as they sort of self-assemble into super complex structures. And biotechnology is sort of harnessing what nature can do already. I'd like to think sort of the biomimicry is sort of then we take what nature does and try to mimic it, understand it, and then engineering biology is trying to engineer and really take that, as Claire said, sort of evolving it, and just looking to see where it can potentially go. And that's where the synthetic biology comes into play, because then you're using the tools of sort of synthetic chemistry with biological building blocks. And I think that is where the real opportunities lie in terms of, yes, nature has got 2 million years of evolution, but we can, with the tools we've got, the high throughput activities, the AI now, we can expedite and potentially evolve quicker than nature. But that opens up a whole range of possibilities. So yeah, I do think there's a subtle difference, and also then in perception of what we're doing with biology, and making sure that we're not doing Frankenstein's models, but we are doing things for useful, good purposes that will help public in various ways.
That seems to be, from what you're saying there, and one of the things I pick out of what you're saying there is very much about speed, in the sense that the millennia have taken us to get to a certain point. But here in engineering biology, one of the things we're doing is understanding how it's happening and then able to take the individual parts of it and speed it up. I wonder, Claire, with some of the expertise and experience you've had, whether that speed piece is actually one of the crucial parts of engineering biology, and actually what makes it more useful today than it's ever been before is the fact we understand the processes more than we've ever done before. And that's allowing us to use, and I think to take Aline's point about AI and digital expertise, we're bringing those together and creating something that perhaps we've never had before. Am I getting close to it, or would you take me in a different direction as I think about that?
No, I think that's right, Steve. I think there's been huge advances in the field and in the tools that we use for engineering biology over the past sort of decade or even longer, and that's allowing us to understand biological systems in more detail than we ever have before. We're able to use tools like AI to predict how complex biological mechanisms are going to work. We're using tools like automation that mean that researchers can run thousands of experiments in parallel, far more than they ever could do sort of manually by hand, and that's really speeding up the pace of discovery and also the pace of translation as well.
So that pace thing here, and people talk about biofoundries and sort of the scale-up piece of this, because you can imagine the sorts of things you're talking about on a lab scale. But how do they get bigger? When people scale these things up, do you end up with labs that are just bigger, or what are the sorts of things that people are doing now to try and scale engineering biology?
It's a good question. So scaling. So I guess with engineering biology, we start off with creating genetic. We start at the DNA level, don't we? The sort of blueprint of life. We might use tools that can go in and allow us to edit the DNA in a cell, insert new genes, create genetic circuits that could be switched on or off. We can even synthesize DNA and assemble long pieces together to create synthetic genomes. So it's really it's very cool what we can do now with genetic manipulation. Once we've got these genetic sequences, we need to kind of boot them up and get them to work. So often we'll put them in a cell. This can be a host cell, or I guess the technical term is often a chassis cell or chassis organism. We then need to test out these cells and check that they're working, that we're doing what they expect them to do, that they're making the product that we want them to make. Once we're happy that they're working okay, then we need to start thinking about scaling up to make sure that we're going to be able to make the product that we want to make in a quantity that's relevant for proving a certain concept or enough for commercial production. So we need to optimize the cell culture process, start to scale that up by putting it in different size bioreactors. There's purifying the product as well, which is an important part of it, making sure we've got the analytical tools for checking that the product's safe and that it's going to do the job that we want it to do. So all those things are important in scale up. It's I guess though, when we're looking at scale up, it's not just a case of doing things in a bigger bucket, as it were. So the bigger bucket is part of things, but the route is complicated to get there. So there's lots of different factors we need to think of.
And Aline, thanks, Claire. And Aline, as you, I mean, the work you're doing in Manchester, and you've got any number of initiatives there, and also a track record of spinning companies out in Manchester that are doing this kind of work. But if you go back to the sort of basics again and talk about in terms of the basics of scale up, what as you walk around the Manchester campus and the work you've got between Manchester and Liverpool, what would you point to as the sorts of things that people would see when they were looking at engineering biology in the scale-up journey?
So I think, it's great current activity that we're doing. And then I think we need to look at, there's some challenges within that sort of scale-up journey as well that we can touch on. So I think you can already see the sort of the automation coming into play in Manchester and also Liverpool in terms of being able to make and edit all sorts of different doing your gene editing on a very high throughput way to test what works, what doesn't work. You're looking at designing enzymes for biocatalysis and screening thousands of different enzymes, partly using the input from AI design, but then partly screening experimentally which ones are going to actually work with the efficiency that you need them to, and also then with the ability to purify the final products. Because of course, when you think about scaling up, you don't just need the enzyme or the gene or the cell biological pathway within your host chassis to work. You need it to work with the purities that are commercially viable in terms of yields, but also then thinking about how you then downstream purify those materials and what all the different steps in that. So I think what is nice about sort of the opportunities in the engineering biology space is, yes, it's the combination of AI with high throughput experimental design and sort of that design, make, test loop cycle that we're going through to optimize your culture or your fermentation to make the product. But we're working very closely in Manchester, Liverpool, and wider across the UK as well, to then look to see how you scale that up. And if you're going to do fermentation, for example, you can do it on sort of the milliliter, but then trying to transfer it across into sort of litre scale. You've got all sorts of questions that you need to think about answering. As Claire said, it's not just taking it and making your beaker a bit bigger. How do you mix your system? How do you get your nutrients flowing through? How do you extract your products? How do you keep your broth alive? So there's all these great engineering questions that we need to answer. So it's engineering the biology of the individual parts, but actually then using sort of more traditional engineering tools in terms of process design to look and scale as you go through. And there's capabilities across the Northwest, across further around the UK, and maybe Claire can talk a little bit about sort of the scale route that you go through in terms of moving up your litre scale. And certainly in Manchester, we've got bioreactors that are about 300 litres, I think now, 150 to 300 litres that we can test some of these things on, and then it comes down to choosing your components, your fermentation, your chassis, etc., optimizing it on the small scale where it's affordable to do lots of experiments, and then trialing it and getting things right as you move on through. And that leads to sort of, I think, the facilities that Claire probably is involved with running that can be then used for the translation.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting what you said there, Aline. Claire, do you want to keep going? I'm dying to talk about the other thing. So you've got almost like as a chemical engineer, I think back to what I was trained on and how different it was to some of the biological processes you're talking about. And yet the scale-up things you're talking about are exactly the same things as you would find in other scale-up. It's a different process, isn't it? And so you've got this combination of people that you need with skills that you need that are coming together around engineering biology that isn't just about biologists or even people who specialize in biomimetics or whatever. You actually need a whole range of scale-up capabilities. And Claire, I guess that is one of the reasons that you and your team, rooted in the northeast of England, you've got a long history in this area. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about, building on what Aline said, really, the sort of the scale-up journey and the kind of facilities that you might use in that.
Yeah, so at CPI we work across different market sectors, everything from biopharma through to food and feed, agri-tech products, all these different products that are made through engineering biology. As Aline's mentioned, we typically would start with kind of a high throughput screening lots of different process conditions. That's a really important thing to do early on to find the best conditions, for example, for growing up your cell or purifying your product so that you can make sure that you've got the best process possible to take forward. So after high throughput screening in scaled down systems, which could be anything from a few milliliters through to 250 mils, would then sort of start to scale up to what we call like lab scale, which could be more in the region of something like 10 liters. There you're going to check the robustness of the system. Is it reproducible? Is it performing well in terms of like how much product the process is making, and then would then scale up to pilot scale or possibly beyond. As Aline mentioned, downstream purification is absolutely critical, and it's a part of the process that often is the most expensive. There's a risk with product purification that you can lose lots of your product through the different steps of purification. So you might end up with a beautifully pure product at the end, but you've lost most of it through the purification process. So that's something we need to watch for and optimize the conditions for when developing the purification process. The analytics as well. Analytical tools, absolutely critical to look at the manufacturing process and the product at the end. Is it safe? Is it going to work? We want to check that there's nothing harmful in there that could hurt patients down the line. That's all part of it. And I think one of the things with engineering biology that can be challenging is that we're working with such a diverse range of different cell types and different products as well, and they've all got different requirements. So I think, this scale-up part, the sort of middle bit of the innovation life cycle, It can be quite painful sometimes, but it's really important because it's often where there's going to be a significant investment decision. So we need to know that our product is going to either perform in clinical trials, or it's going to increase crop yield out in the field, or improve the appearance of skin. So it's a very critical part of the overall process.
Does it help having... Sorry, go on, Aline, you go.
No, I was just going to say, add in, and I do think that is the real critical point, that sort of in between valley of death, if you like, to get it, you know, from the lab out through pilot scale. And I think it's particularly deep a trough that you need to go through with engineering biology, as you say, Claire, because every cell or chassis is different, and therefore your purification processes are going to be different. But it's one of the huge opportunities with engineering biology, that you can produce all sorts of different products using a whole spectrum of different chassis and biological pathways. But it's also one of the challenges, and trying to talk about that more in terms of the valley of death. And, you know, people talk about the valley of death when you're starting up and scaling out a business, but actually really appreciating how deep that trough is that you've got to pass over, I think, is really key to be able to see some of these translational activities move forward. And I think this comes down to educating the government in terms of what they need to do to really sort of bolster and enable this to happen, but also educating the investor community, so they know how patient their capital is going to be when they invest it. You know, so these are the North Star that we're working on, but it's going to take X amount of time, and it's longer than maybe a traditional medicine or a traditional molecule or a traditional product, and just helping them appreciate that, so then we can do the science, have time to do the science and the scale up to get these out.
So it strikes me that what we're talking about here is you've got this really fast ability to do biological testing to check whether you've got a product that even starts to meet the criteria of something you're looking for. So you're using the skill set, which sounds a really deep set of skills that's needed to do that. And we're harnessing digital automation, AI, biology, chemistry, a whole set of engineering tools in those early stages. But what you're also saying, I think both of you, is that not only is that really important, but you've then got this whole piece that to get the process from where it is when you get it looks promising in the lab, to get it to actually be commercially viable is also a journey. So not only have you done this fantastic, really deep biology work, which you've used the tools that we've talked about, but you've then also commercially got to get it from here to here, and access to different you talked about the different assets that you've got access to, the different scale-up capabilities. But that also brings us into another set of skills, which is, as you said, access to finance, access to being able to talk in a language that government can understand, finance can understand, the communities, and have the patience and the longevity of a look and a reach to actually get that product through a journey, which may require you to actually test in the market that people are happy using products like this. And Claire, you were talking a little bit about healthcare, but they're also in all the other different fields. You've got this. And we'll come on in a minute to, I think you used the word a little bit about, do people trust the science, Aline, earlier on, and we'll come on in a moment. But I'm wondering why it is now that's, you know, the government's named its 5 crucial technologies, of which engineering biology is one of them. Why has it picked engineering biology? What is it about now that makes this the right time to go ahead with engineering biology as one of the things UK PLC should be best at? Claire, do you want to go first, and then?
I think it's the ability that engineering biology has to tackle some of the most pressing challenges that there are in the world. Things like food security, sustainability, meeting net zero targets, obviously healthcare and national security challenges as well. It's that demand coupled with the advances in the field that have been made that mean that it's sort of now is the right time to really look at how to scale some of these technologies, or, you know, as many as possible of these technologies, so that they can start to be out in the field, having an impact, helping us to improve people's health, meet the sustainability goals that we want. So I think it's that combination of need and technology sort of readiness.
Aline, do you agree with that? Is there more?
I completely agree with that, and I think that it's a confluence of the customer pool as people are becoming a little bit more aware of the products they're buying and the sources of those products, which is a great thing, and we need to encourage that. And then the need. Sort of government targets as we move towards sustainability, but then sort of the wider sort of geopolitical climate, the macroeconomic climate, I think is also really starting to make us look a little bit more internally. As we're thinking about reshoring, onshoring, sort of manufacturing of key products that we really need on a day-to-day basis. I think globalization is great, but I think recent events have just made us question what we're doing. And sort of the big push from government at the moment in terms of sort of really trying to generate the growth of the economy. And how do we do that? And we are competitive on a global stage in terms of the fundamental technology and understanding that we have in engineering biology. So it's really, can we capitalize on that? One, we don't want to lose out. Two, we don't want to just diffuse out our great knowledge around the world, which we do want to do, but let's benefit from it ourselves economically. Don't just give it away and allow the rest of the world to prosper. So thinking about, GDP and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think huge pressures and huge pull, but exciting at the same time.
So back to that conversation on the street then about why it matters. What I'm hearing you both say is that this is the time, because actually we are in a really good place in terms of our ability to actually execute engineering biology in this country and fundamental research in engineering biology. We are one of the key players in the world still in terms of engineering biology research. And that actually, with the scale-up capability we've got an ability to create products that will either, I'm guessing in some cases they'll replace existing products, but in other places they'll actually be new products that society needs. And to actually make those use reshoring and onshoring, but actually to just make them here in the UK and actually be a place where you can manufacture products that have got a longevity into the future. And the great thing about them is that they are climate friendly in the way that, in a sense, and that they're not necessarily fossil based and not really high energy. Often these processes are done at temperatures that are don't require you to put tons of energy in. So this is really a good thing, isn't it? So there's been a number of reports. I noticed the government's national vision for engineering biology, and Claire, you were in front of the House of Lords in part of their House of Lords report. Both of them talk about us being on the cusp of an industrial revolution, and that it could happen here. They talk about health, food, the environment, and defence, which, when you look at those four, because they're pretty big areas, aren't they? Health, food, environment, defence. Which are you most excited about in terms of looking forward and where there might be promising products coming through the scale-up journey?
I think it's hard to choose between them. There's important global challenges across all of them that engineering biology is already helping with and has potential to further help with in the future. So I think there's solid arguments that we could make for each of them. There's really exciting developments in health, things like personalized cancer vaccines, incredibly exciting, cell therapies, microbiome therapeutics. There's even things like blood that's being grown in the lab that can help with supplying rare blood types. Of course, also equally important, food and ensuring food security whilst tackling climate change. So things like alternative proteins. There's alternative proteins that have been around for a long time now, like well-established brands are that they've been in the supermarkets for decades. But there's new exciting types of foods coming in on the horizon as well. Things like using precision fermentation to make proteins that are identical to as if they'd come from an animal product. Things like cultured meat, where we're growing up animal cells in a bioreactor. But coming on to to defence, I think the application of engineering biology in defence and security is a really important area. So being able to protect the population against new biothreats, and these could be like naturally emerging biothreats, but also potentially engineered as well. And of course, engineering biology is a dual-use technology, and that's something that we need to be prepared for.
That's a real breadth, isn't it? Aline, do you see the same from where you're sat? Have you got some others that you want to highlight?
I think you did a great job of covering sort of the core bases there, Claire. I think the only thing I would add would be sort of around sort of the materials aspect, and sort of the consumables that we use sort of on a day-to-day basis, from, using engineering biology and biological building blocks to look to replace the carbon that we extract now and make these materials from fossil fuels. So, thinking about, surfactants that go into all sort of our cleaning products that we use, through to sort of plastic packaging, etc., and materials that make up components of cars, airplanes, and all sorts of things. So that material side. So, I think engineering biology, I think in one of the reports that you mentioned, it's got the potential to be sort of the manufacturing route for 70% today of all the consumables that we use on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's another sort of exciting area that will help us transition to sort of those net zero targets. And I think that's where we can start thinking about using carbon that's in waste streams at the moment, whether it be biomass or municipal waste. How can we extract the carbon out of that to sort of recycle it to sort of get that circularity of the bioeconomy as well?
Yeah, I think
you both gone, Claire. Yeah.
Sorry, Steve, just to build on what Aline said, the materials side of engineering biology is incredibly excited. I saw something in the news. There's a UK-based company called Lab Grown Leather, and they're developing cultivated leather to overcome some of the sort of environmental and ethical concerns around traditional leather. And they're using engineering biology to create leather that's, I guess, it's structurally identical to natural leather. They've even made T-Rex leather, so they've used reconstructed dinosaur DNA. So they're like really pushing the boundaries of what we can do. And, who knows? Maybe we'll see T-Rex leather handbags and shoes on the catwalks at New York Fashion Week in the future. That would be cool.
I love that USP.
Yeah.
That is something else. Is that, Claire? Well, that's great. I mean, and the breadth of it that you're saying there is just really mind blowing, actually. And finishing with dinosaur leather as well. That's quite something. And that probably brings us to a question of scale in the UK and the opportunity for the UK, because numerous reports tell you how big this market's going to grow to. And you've talked about, Aline, 70% of products. I mean, if you think today about what is fossil based, and then think about what you might be able to transition to over time as we get the cost right of these products and we get it right. What do you think in terms of for the UK? What do we need to be doing to capture the opportunity? We've talked a lot about the opportunity. We've talked about the basic research and why we're good at it. But Aline, what do you think in terms of what should we be doing next? If you were given the chance to write the strategy or the plan, what would you be saying for the UK to actually be a key player in the 2040s or in the 2030s, but also in the 2040s about using engineering biology? What would you say?
So, really good question. What I would look at is sort of trying to plug that gap from maybe the TRL 2-3 level up to sort of the higher TRL level, and really work to invest in helping academics get the technology and research out from other areas as well, and really just helping them get that scale up journey right, and that includes sort of helping invest in infrastructure and making sure that we've got that infrastructure in the UK that's available, that's affordable for people to really sort of look and explore, and building out the skill base. So investing in the skill base partly. So we've got, more accessibility of people who can understand that scalability journey, from sort of, the milliliter through to the multi-liter scales. And then encouraging more collaboration in that pre-competitive space, so we can share the learnings that we have with different chassis types. So really just encouraging sort of a little bit more open research in that space. Obviously, you need to keep proprietary things in those doors, but just being able to talk about it a little bit more. So creating a sort of a UK-wide facilitated work in this space, I think, would be really beneficial. There's great pockets of it that exist already, but can we join up so we can share the learnings, pain points, because that's where you learn. When you make mistakes, that's when you learn. So if we can share those, then other people don't make the same mistakes. Yes, talking about really getting the investment available into the UK. I think there's no shortage, she says, of sort of seed funding and pre-seed, maybe even Series A funding, but getting the investors with the patient capital to invest in those Series B, Series C funding to keep things in the UK, to build out that sort of broader translational experience, and encouraging cluster growth. So, you've got the larger companies that we do still have here in the UK, and creating that clustering effect. So we've got sort of micros and the SMEs bubbling up, but they're working, in parallel or closely with the corporates that could potentially then acquire them and help scale. Once they've got the pilot data and proven the sort of scalability, then they've got the route to the full scale, full commercial. And of course, then you've got the whole sort of regulation and policy side, where we really need. I mean, there's good things been happening in the past few years, which is great to see. But there's always more that we can do, and also really to we've been talking a lot about what the regulations should be for bio-based products or engineering biology products, but actually starting to see that roll through in terms of regulation rollout, looking at tax benefits for companies who are trying to replace fossil fuel products. So how can we reduce the tax credit that's already given to fossil base and switch that over to the non-fossil base to encourage that adoption, because we can replace, but then it's then the consumer is facing with a price differential. So there's a lot of things that we can do there, and to expedite that journey and acceptance through that regulatory pathway. But I'm hoping the Regulatory Innovation Office, RIO, I always get that
RIO,
yeah. So just making sure that we get that bit right.
That's a comprehensive blueprint you've given us there. Claire, do you want to fill in any gaps? There weren't many, but do you want anything you heard of Aline you want to build on there?
Yeah, I think Aline did a great job of covering the points there. I think, just to recap on the point around scaling up our innovative new the products that are being developed within the UK is going to be absolutely key. Helping these innovations get to market where they can reach patients and consumers and start having an impact, and also create sort of globally competitive companies as well that want to stay in the UK and keep the economic benefit in the UK. I think, again, supporting clusters to become kind of bioeconomy powerhouses, and making sure that these clusters are connected so that they can collaborate easily. The regulatory aspect was an interesting one. I think there's an opportunity for the UK to leverage kind of regulatory leadership. We have a pro-innovation regulatory environment in the UK that means that approvals can be accelerated. So I think we can make the most of that. And international partnerships as well, I think is important for us to keep developing partnerships with countries such as the US, where we can co-develop new innovations and possibly look at sharing resources as well. So I think, lots for us to think about.
It strikes me as I listen to, exactly, and it strikes me as I listen to what you're both saying that one of the exciting things of this is also that manufacturing tends to be something that is not necessarily done in the southeast. Actually, there is plenty of manufacturing done in the southeast, but actually, if you look at United Kingdom, there are whole pockets of the United Kingdom where you've got real strengths in manufacturing. And one of the opportunities here with engineering biology and the bioeconomy is how distributed it can be in terms of solutions. You're from the Northwest, Aline. Clare, you're sat in the Northeast. Is that something that in both the Northwest and the Northeast you see as a strength?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I think it's really important that we've got a spread of investment across the UK. As you say, different regions have different strengths and different heritages as well. So Teesside, for example, has got real strengths in industry, and it's got a really long heritage in biotechnology and engineering biology that spans actually decades. Like back in the 70s, Teesside was innovating in alternative proteins. So I think this spread is really important for inclusive growth and reducing any economic inequalities between regions and creating these highly skilled jobs that are going to attract and retain people in a region. It's important from a national resilience perspective as well. Like, we wouldn't want to have all of our capabilities kind of clustered in just one location in the UK. And it's going to, as I say, create a demand for new jobs, but it's also going to create kind of a career ladder, investing in engineering biology, like new labs, new infrastructure, new engineering biology hubs. It's creating roles from apprenticeships right through to CEO level. So I think that breadth of different roles at different levels is important as well.
I think the question around trying to encourage the growth of companies and looking at the scalability and the acceptability of that within sort of local population. So I think some of that is due to, you have to think about the scalability, and I think this is where the diversity across the UK is really important, in terms of thinking the Southeast has got manufacturing and it's got great track record in sort of innovation and scalability. The Northwest has got that too, but it's also got the space to grow and sort of expand out manufacturing capabilities. And of course, thinking about the acceptability of that. I mean, I think Teesside is very similar to the Northwest in some ways, that we have got rich heritage of sort of manufacturing, the Industrial Revolution starting, the original with textiles and things starting in and around Manchester area. So how can we sort of reinvigorate and get that sort of next industrial revolution to happen within our regions is really important. And I think it's about engaging with the local communities and explaining what the opportunities are. And hopefully, with engineering biology, there's less pollution, less energy required, so it will have less impact in terms of sort of that health and well-being aspects on sort of the local community. But it will be providing jobs at all levels for the local community. And I think that regional economic growth argument is super important, and it provides opportunities as well as building resilience, as you said there, Claire. So I think, that's really, really key.
Do you think one of the things that society has a suspicion of, if you like, and you used the word Frankenstein, Aline, right at the beginning, but there is this sense that there's a science here that is new, and how much in control are we of living matter, if you like, so are we creating things that are unnatural in some way? How do we build the trust of society that we're in control and that this is actually good for society, what we're doing? How do you do that, Aline, in your day-to-day work?
So I think it's about having that open, transparent conversation. And yes, I do think we're making new materials, new molecules, new biological pathways, but it's explaining what the opportunities are with this technology and how it will help and impact individual lives for the good, but actually also standing up and saying we're doing responsible research and talking about sort of our ethical code that we work by, and just by talking about it, by demonstrating the boundaries that we're working in, and explaining the opportunities in a very accessible way, I think is key. And you have to do that to different audiences. And I think starting with kids in primary school when they're learning English and maths and talking about science, but then talking about the new science and bringing that in very early. So then it just becomes part of their sort of standard vocabulary, standard understanding. Partly that encourages them to think about biotechnology as a career, so we can get the skilled workforce of tomorrow. But partly it just starts to ingrain it into sort of societal thinking. But you still, we need to address it at all stages at the moment. And it's just getting out there, talking and showing what we can do, and showing that we have got that sort of ethical consideration, and we are responsible leaders in the way forward.
I think it's a really good point, Steve, that you raised, because public acceptance of these technologies is going to be absolutely critical, and ultimately it'll determine the commercial success of a lot of products in the field. So we need to try and avoid misinformation. We need to ensure transparency. That's key to avoiding like suspicion that the engineering biology community might be hiding information. I think clear communication on the safety of products, including how they're ultimately going to be better for people, better for the environment, like clear labelling and assurance that products are safe. I think Aline mentioned this, but we can use examples of where these products are already working and the impact that they're already having on people's lives. Like engineering biology products are already out there improving people's lives, and I think we can talk about that.
I think that's a really important point. One of the things that struck me during the pandemic was the fact that we had a fantastic solution to keeping people safe in the vaccines that we created, and yet social media work that was in the background was really, there's some really difficult messages being shared of, quite fantastic, some of them, in terms of what people thought vaccines were doing to you. And I think you're right, in both of you, in terms of what you're saying, in terms of being people talking about the science more, and people who are credible talking about it. And I think that's local conversations as well. I think it's important as as we go about what we do. And one of the things I often say is, if you're in science, you need to talk about it, because people actually they see Aline, they see Clare, and they'll actually trust you more because they see Aline and they say Clare, won't they? Which I think is points you're making. So I think what you're saying there is really important, and it's the benefit in everybody's lives. I think is the other crucial piece here that we just need to keep showing. So. I wondered if we could move on to then think about, I talked about a vaccine there, but I wonder if both of you could share a couple of your favourites of what are products that are out there where we've got commercial application of engineering biology. Aline, how about you going first? What are your favourites?
Good question. So I'm sort of a materials person. Really by training. I like the fact that we can make materials. So, for example, I'll go to other things as well, but the work that we do, so we do a lot of biomimicry. So we try to look at how proteins self-assemble to make these super complex, highly functional material, and they do it with 100% efficiency. And of course, I sit in the chemical engineering department. 100% efficiency is the North Star. So we, take fragments of proteins and we design the amino acid sequences so they will come together in specific structures, and we mimic natural tissues, from bone to cartilage to neuronal networks in the brain to cardiac tissue, and then we use them in regenerative medicine applications. So, peripheral nerve repair, cardiac repair after someone's had a heart attack, all these types of applications, and we learn from biology how it does it, so then we can make synthetic alternatives. We can tweak them and improve them, so we can treat sort of long-term health conditions. And we do the same with drug delivery activities as well. So that for me is something really quite cool and interesting, because we're solving sort of health challenges, learning from how we do it and how nature does it already. Thinking about other engineering, biology, products and materials, I think a couple that come to mind. Work in Manchester and Polyform is obviously a company that is sort of growing and thriving within the northwest area. So they have got make biosurfactants, and they've got proprietary purification technology, and they are looking to scale up these sort of rhamnolipids and others to get it into detergents and personal care products and things like that, and using a waste biomass feedstock, engineering biology, and getting it into the product. So for me, that's great, because it shows the diversity of skills that you need. So you've got the biotechnologist engineering the host cells, all the way through to the purification, the scale up, the formulation, and then the product acceptability. So that's another great example. And then there's lots of bioplastics, biocoatings, replacing compostable cups, for example. So lots of things, and making things from seaweeds, and anything polymers, materials I get quite excited by.
Brilliant, Aline. That's great. Claire, what are your favourites?
Oh God, I've got lots of favourites. Steve, how long have you got? I'll just go. I'll just mention a few. Obviously, biotherapeutics. So many examples, even just within that field. But if we take, for example, messenger RNA, vaccines and therapeutics, before the COVID-19 pandemic, messenger RNA it had been around in development, but it hadn't really been commercialised. But then during the pandemic, we saw it rapidly developed, enter clinical trials at a speed that was unprecedented, really. And then obviously CPI has the RNA Centre of Excellence, as you know, to help with getting new RNA therapies into clinical trials. And I guess moving on to maybe the food area, I'm very excited still about the cultured meat market. And recently we saw cultured meat pet treats start to become commercialised in the UK. So we saw cultured meat pet treats for sale in Pets at Home. That was a UK company called Meatly. I guess to give an example that CPI, of a specific example that CPI have worked on, I'm a bit of a microbiome enthusiast. So I love all things microbiome. And we worked with an exciting company called Immune Boost Clinic to support the development of their microbiome health supplement that's called IMI. So IMI is based on a specific strain of a specific species of Mycobacterium, and this bacterium interacts with immune cells in the gut, and it supports immune health and mental and physical well-being. And we worked with Immune Boost Clinic to develop a good and consistent and reliable manufacturing process to the right standards needed, sort of food grade standards. And we did that at our Novel Food Innovation Centre. So we supported the development of different types of products, things like capsules and drinks. And we helped with Immune Boost Clinic's journey to market it, not just in the UK, but also Europe and the US as well. And IMI was actually featured in Vogue magazine, which is quite exciting. The ultra high impact publication of Vogue magazine. If I just maybe give just one final example, which isn't commercialized yet, but it's really exciting. It's there's interest in engineering, biology, and space. So applications in space travel, but also biomanufacturing in space. So there's different companies looking at the effect of microgravity, so in lower orbit, on manufacturing protein-based drugs. So, for example, a company called BioOrbit, they're looking at how to take advantage of microgravity to enable protein-based drugs, things like monoclonal antibodies, to crystallize. And if you're able to crystallize a protein-based drug, it means that it can be given to a patient through subcutaneous injection, rather than the patient having to go into the hospital for sort of intravenous administration. So obviously better for patients, better for healthcare providers. So I'm excited to see where that goes as well.
I love your examples, Claire. They're finishing with space, biomanufacturing in space, having taken us through Vogue magazine, but also then prior to that, you gave us dinosaur leather. And the combination between that and Aline, I think biosurfactants and sort of the mass availability of the products that we take for granted to be made from engineering biology is just one of the most exciting prospects, I think, of the sort of the 2030s and 40s, is how do we get to that world where we're eating and using products that are not basically causing planet crisis for us. That would be that's such a great thing for engineering biology, and it sort of brings us to the end of this time together. I'd love to be able to bottle both of your enthusiasm and market that too alongside this podcast, because you've both given us such a breadth of thinking about where we could take engineering biology and the kinds of things that industry could end up looking like, but also how exciting it is for children of today to potentially set their sights on having a career in this area, where you can see solutions for the next tens of years being created using the techniques that not just about biology. This is about a whole breadth of science that we're pulling together, and a sort of deep technology that is using all of these skill sets. So thank you for that. Thank you both. So as we finish, my thanks to Professor Aline Miller and to Dr. Clare Trippett, who have given us real life examples of what it means to use engineering biology, what it is. And a big thank you to you two for listening and coming on this journey with us. If you want to learn more about CPI and its work in engineering biology, do visit uk-cpi.com. Don't forget to subscribe to us so that you can catch the next conversation in this series, where we'll look at the challenges of scaling bio-based products and processes from lab to market. Let's innovate together.